Frederick Douglass was born in 1818 as a slave. Despite the fact that he spent his childhood in slavery, he learned how to read and write as a young boy. When he was 20 years old, Douglass escaped from his masters and fled to New York, where he began a career that would earn him the international fame. As soon as he was old enough to understand the situation he was in, he despised slavery and the inequality that it brought. However, throughout his life, Douglass advocated universal equality, not just between races, but between sexes as well. Douglass was not the only abolitionist of his time, but he was certainly among the most successful. He gave brilliant speeches that denounced slavery and promoted emancipation. The fact that he even could give such brilliant oratory had almost as much effect as the orations themselves. Many people, both Northerners and Southerners, found it difficult to believe that a black man and former slave could articulate as well as Douglass could, which disproved the theory that blacks were intellectually inferior to whites. He also published multiple newspapers, the most famous of which was titled the North Star. Douglass was also a fierce supporter of women's rights, and he was one of the few men who attended the Seneca Falls Convention of 1848, as well as the only black man. The autobiographies of Douglass also supported his cause. In them, he describes the hardships he faced as a slave and the inhumanity with which he was treated. His brilliant orations, as well as his other achievements, earned him audiences with President Lincoln and later President Johnson. He advised both presidents during the Civil War and during Reconstruction, and later voiced his support for President Grant's crackdown on the Ku Klux Klan. The influence he had with these presidents shows just how successful he was at convincing people of his beliefs. Douglass did not support violence to get his point across. While he wanted the end of slavery to come swiftly, he also wanted it to come peacefully. When he met John Brown and heard of Brown's plot to start a slave rebellion in what is now West Virginia, Douglass refused to take part in the scheme and even went into hiding after Brown was captured. Performers were more than common during the early 19th century. Douglass was among the lucky few who were able to witness the fruitions of their efforts within their lifetimes. Douglass was dynamic in the emancipation of slavery, as well as the passing of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. The support of the 14th Amendment, however, led to a loss in support from his female supporters. The amendment, which gave blacks the right to vote, failed to include women. Douglass, who was seen as a champion of women's rights, was seen as hypocritical. The end of slavery was the only reform Douglass pushed that came to fruition during his lifetime. His dream of universal equality would not come close to true for nearly a century, as both racism and sexism persisted well after the Civil War, and it wasn't until the Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s that the segregation of blacks and whites ended. The legacy of Frederick Douglass is felt to this day. His efforts helped lead to the end of slavery, and he showed the potential African Americans had to do great things and be great people. He has gone down in history as one of the most famous and influential African Americans of the 19th century. As Douglass himself said, the life of the nation is only secure while the nation is honest, truthful, and virtuous. Douglass helped bring security to a nation faced with many dangers.